The day begins not with the sun, but with a deep, internal clock, one wound by centuries of habit and necessity. You rise from a straw pallet on the beaten earth floor, the air inside your small cottage thick with the lingering warmth of the central hearth and the close, musky scent of the animals who share this space with you. Outside, the world is awash of gray and shadow, the familiar shapes of the neighboring huts barely distinguishable from the dark bulk of the trees. You pull on your rough-spun woolen tunic and leggings, the fabric coarse against your skin, and step out into the pre-dawn chill. Your destination is the fields, the enormous open fields that stretch out from the village like a great patchwork quilt. These are not the small, hedge-lined squares of a later age. These are vast, unfenced expanses, often hundreds of acres in size, divided into a dizzying array of long, curving strips. Each family in the village holds several of these strips, scattered across the 3 great fields that dominate your world. One field lies fallow each year, resting, its soil slowly regaining its strength. Another is sown in the autumn with wheat or rye, and the third is planted in the spring with barley, oats, peas, or beans. This is the rhythm of your life, the 3-field system that dictates your every move, a cycle as certain as the moon and stars. You walk the familiar path, your bare feet or simple leather shoes sinking slightly into the damp soil. You join the other men of the village, a silent, trudging procession moving towards the communal plow. It is a heavy, cumbersome beast of wood and iron, often kept in the church for safekeeping, and it is shared by all. A team of oxen, their breath misting in the cold air, is yoked to the front. The work begins. The plowshare bites into the earth with a satisfying tearing sound, turning over the dark, rich soil. You walk alongside, guiding it, your muscles straining, your body moving in a familiar, exhausting cadence that you have known since you were a boy. The field shows the marks of this endless labor, a pattern of ridges and furrows that ripple across the landscape, a testament to the thousands of times the plow has turned at the end of each long strip. This work is the foundation of everything. The bread you eat, a dense, dark loaf made from barley or rye, is born from this struggle. The thick pottage that simmers over the fire, a stew of peas and beans, is the fruit of this soil. Every calorie you expend in the field must be replaced by what the field provides, and the margin for error is terrifyingly slim. You are constantly watching the sky, reading the clouds, feeling the direction of the wind. A late frost in spring can kill the new seeds in the ground, condemning the village to a hungry winter. A summer of relentless rain can rot the wheat before it can be harvested. You and your neighbors are bound together, not just by proximity, but by this shared, perpetual anxiety. You are all subject to the tyranny of the weather and the weariness of the land itself, which, after centuries of use, feels tired, yielding a little less each year. This is the world before the shadow falls, a world of immense, unending labor, governed by a rhythm that feels both eternal and deeply, deeply fragile. Leaving the vast, open expanse of the fields behind, you walk back towards the cluster of dwellings that is your world. A village is not laid out with any grand design. It is a heaped village, a jumble of structures that has grown organically over generations. Cottages of wattle and daub, their wooden frames filled with a mixture of mud, clay, and straw, are scattered in a seemingly random pattern, their thatched roofs a uniform shade of weathered brown. Each cottage stands within its own small plot, a toft where a few chickens might scratch in the dirt, and behind it stretches a longer garden, the croft where you grow the cabbages, leeks, and onions that supplement your diet of grain. These gardens are for sustenance, not beauty. They are filled with herbs for remedies and vegetables for the pot, a practical and vital extension of your home. The layout of the village, which appears so chaotic, is in fact a map of necessity. Huts are clustered near the communal well, the source of water for drinking and cooking, or positioned to avoid the low-lying ground that floods in the spring. Your entire existence is shaped by the land and its limitations. As you walk, you are acutely aware of your place in this small universe. You are a villain, a peasant tied to this manor, this land. You cannot leave without the permission of the Lord, a man you have likely never seen, for he is often absent on royal service. His power is represented by the manor house, which stands apart from the village, perhaps a simple timber-framed hall, or, if the Lord is wealthy, a fortified stone structure with its own moat. It is a constant, silent reminder of who owns the land you work, the cottage you inhabit, your very life. The Lord's will is executed by his officials. You might see the bailiff, a freeman appointed by the Lord to oversee the work on the domain, the Lord's personal land. He is often an unpopular figure, his presence a source of resentment as he directs your compulsory labor. More familiar is the reeve, a man elected from among the peasants themselves. He organizes your labor service, keeps the accounts, and represents the village at the manor court, a difficult position that places him between the villagers and the Lord's authority. You and your neighbors are also bound by a system called frank pledge, a promise that holds every man responsible for the behavior of the others. It is a form of self-governance, but it feels more like a web of mutual surveillance, another layer of the bonds that tie you to this place and to each other. The two stone pillars of your world are the mill and the church. The Lord's mill, powered by the stream that runs beside the village, is where you must take your grain to be ground into flour, and you must pay for the privilege. It is a necessity, another reminder of your dependence. But the true heart of the village is the parish church. Its stone walls and small bell tower rise above the humble cottages, a symbol of a power even greater than the Lord's. You attend Mass here, listening to the priest chant in a language you do not understand, the Latin, a mysterious and holy sound. The church is part of your life, from cradle to grave. It is where you are christened, where you are married, and where you will one day be buried. The churchyard itself is a communal space, a place for games and festivals on holy days, those rare and precious moments of rest from the endless cycle of work. It is here, within the shadow of the church, that the bonds of your community feel strongest, a shared faith and a shared life under the watchful eye of God. These bonds, forged by labor, law, and faith, feel as solid and eternal as the stone of the church itself. You push open the simple wooden door to your cottage and step from the pale daylight into a world of perpetual twilight. The interior of your home is a single, open space, a 3-bay house where the functions of life flow into one another without walls or privacy. The air is thick and hazy, perpetually filled with the sting of wood smoke from the fire that smolders day and night on a raised stone hearth in the center of the room. There is no chimney, only a hole in the thatched roof above, and the smoke coats the rafters in a layer of black soot, a constant irritant to your eyes and lungs. Light filters in dimly through 1 or 2 small, unglazed windows, which are covered by wooden shutters at night or in bad weather. The floor beneath your feet is nothing more than beaten earth, covered with a scattering of straw, or, in the warmer months, sweet-smelling rushes to keep down the dust and damp. This floor is not yours alone. In one section of the room, partitioned off by a low wattle fence, are your animals, perhaps a cow for milk, a few pigs, or some chickens. They live with you under the same roof, their warmth a welcome comfort in the winter, their smells an inseparable part of the atmosphere of your home. Life within these 4 walls is a constant, chaotic dance of domestic tasks. Over the central fire, a large iron or brass kettle hangs from a trivet, perpetually simmering with water or the day's pottage. This thick porridge of oatmeal, peas, and beans is the cornerstone of your diet, a warm and filling meal that sustains you through the long hours of labor. Sometimes it might be flavored with a piece of bacon or lard, but meat is a rarity, saved for special occasions. The sounds of the house are the bubbling of the pot, the crackle of the fire, the soft lowing of the cow, and the rustle of children and animals moving freely in and out of the open doorway. The furniture is sparse and practical. Your family eats at a simple trestle table, sitting on rough-hewn benches or stools. At night, the table can be taken apart and stored against the wall to make space for sleeping. A wooden cupboard or hutch holds your few possessions: earthenware bowls, wooden jugs, and spoons. From the smoky rafters hang bags of grain, dried herbs, and perhaps a salted ham, kept high away from the reach of rats and mice. Your clothes and any precious linen are stored in a wooden chest, which also serves as seating. At night, the world shrinks to the small circle of light cast by the fire. A large ceramic lid with holes, a fire cover, might be placed over the embers to keep them glowing safely until morning. The family sleeps together on straw pallets laid out on the floor, or perhaps in a small loft at one end of the house, reached by a ladder. You and your wife share a bed, a simple mattress of straw, perhaps with your youngest child nestled between you for warmth. Comfort is a foreign concept. The straw bedding is often alive with bedbugs, fleas, and lice, a constant itching irritation that is simply a part of life. Bathing is an infrequent and laborious event, involving a large wooden barrel filled with water that must be carried and heated, with the whole family likely using the same water in succession. This is your sanctuary, your home. It is cramped, smoky, and shared with animals, a place where the line between human and beast is blurred. It is a space defined by survival, not comfort, and in its very construction, in the damp earth floor and the flea-ridden straw, it holds a vulnerability you cannot yet comprehend. Life is measured by the turning of the seasons, the familiar tasks laid out in the agricultural calendar that has governed your ancestors for generations. You know that February is for carting manure to enrich the tired fields, that April is for the spring sowing of seeds, that June is for the first haymaking and the shearing of sheep. Your world is this village, these fields, the nearby woods where you are permitted to gather fallen branches for firewood. Your concerns are immediate and tangible: the health of your cow, the coming harvest, the repair of a fence. The wider world is a distant, almost mythical place. News arrives slowly, carried by the occasional traveler, merchant, or pilgrim who passes through the region. It is at the small weekly market, where you might trade a few eggs or some cheese for something you cannot make yourself, that you first hear the whispers. A merchant, his face weathered from long journeys, speaks of a great sickness in the east, in the faraway lands of Asia. His words paint a picture so strange and terrible, it sounds like a fable, a story to frighten children. He speaks of a pestilence that travels on ships, a disease that can empty an entire city in a matter of weeks, leaving houses full of the dead with no one left to bury them. The villagers who overhear this story react with a mixture of awe and disbelief. It is a grim tale, certainly, but it is a tale from another world, as remote as the stories the priest tells of Jerusalem or Rome. In a life filled with everyday hardship, where death from accident or illness is a constant companion, and a bad harvest can bring famine, people are accustomed to tragedy. They are, by necessity, fatalists. Such a disaster, if it is true at all, is seen as God's will, a punishment for the sins of strange people in a distant land. It has nothing to do with you, with your village, with the solid, reassuring reality of the English countryside. You listen to the story, a chill running through you despite the press of the small crowd, and then you turn back to your own life. You have work to do. The sun is climbing in the sky, and the day's labor will not wait for frightening stories from afar. You dismiss the thought, pushing it to the back of your mind. Yet the rumor lingers. It is a seed planted in the fertile soil of the mind. In the evenings, as families gather around their hearths, the story is retold, perhaps embellished, the details growing more vivid and more terrifying with each telling. Some say the sickness is a corrupted air, a foul miasma that rises from the earth. Others whisper that it is caused by an alignment of the planets, a sign of God's displeasure with the world. The words, "the great mortality," are spoken in hushed tones, a name for this distant, abstract horror. But still, it remains unreal. You look around at the familiar faces of your neighbors, at the solid walls of your cottage, at the fields stretching out under the sky, and the merchant's tale seems impossible. Your world is defined by the tangible, the things you can see and touch, the soil, the stone of the church, the wood of your plow. This story of a pestilence that can cross oceans and lay waste to nations belongs to the realm of fantasy. It is a dark cloud on a very distant horizon, too far away to cast a shadow on your life. The seasons turn, and the rumor that once felt like a distant fable begins to acquire the hard edges of truth. The news that now trickles into the village is no longer about faraway Asia, but about places you know, names that are familiar. A seaman, they say, arrived in the port of Melcombe in Dorset in the heat of June, carrying the sickness with him from the continent. From there, the stories describe the pestilence spreading like a dark stain along the coast and creeping inland up the river valleys. The great port of Bristol, a place some villagers may have visited once in their lives to trade, has been struck. The name of London, the vast, sprawling capital, is now spoken with a new kind of fear. The shadow is no longer on a distant horizon. It has fallen upon England. The journey of the plague is now measured not in thousands of miles, but in days of walking. It is moving through Salisbury and Winchester, making its way overland, an invisible, relentless army. The atmosphere in your own village begins to change, slowly at first, but perceptibly. There is a new tension in the air, a quiet watchfulness. Strangers on the road, once a source of curiosity and news, are now viewed with suspicion and fear. The weekly market is smaller, more subdued. Fewer merchants are willing to travel, and those who do have grim faces and little to say. The flow of goods and news, the lifeblood of the wider world, is slowing to a trickle. People begin to stay closer to home, the familiar circle of the village feeling less like a comforting embrace and more like a fragile defense against a threat that is drawing ever nearer. Prayers in the church take on a new urgency. The priest speaks of penitence, of appeasing the wrath of God, but his words are laced with an anxiety that everyone can feel. The belief that the plague was a punishment for others, for foreigners and city dwellers, begins to waver. If it can strike a great and holy city like Bristol, if it can reach the heart of the kingdom in London, then nowhere is truly safe. The most unsettling change is in the sounds that carry on the wind. The church bell, which marks the hours and calls you to worship, seems to toll more frequently for funerals. Not in your own parish, not yet, but in the neighboring ones. You stand in your croft in the evening, listening, and you can hear the faint, mournful sound of a bell from a village a few miles away, a lonely, questioning note that hangs in the twilight air. Each toll feels like a footstep, the sound of the pestilence marching closer. You find yourself scanning the faces of your neighbors, looking for any sign of sickness. A cough, a sudden weariness, things that were once commonplace now spark a flicker of alarm. The old fatalism, the belief that your life is in God's hands, is now locked in a struggle with a new and very human fear. The world is shrinking. The roads that once connected you to the kingdom are now potential conduits of death. The rivers that water your fields could carry the disease to your doorstep. The invisible walls of your village, which once felt so strong and secure, now feel terrifyingly porous. The shadow is no longer a story. It is a presence, waiting just beyond the woods, just over the next hill. And then it is here. It does not arrive with a grand announcement or a visible sign. It begins quietly in a neighboring cottage, with a man you have known your entire life. One morning, he does not go to the fields. His wife says he has a fever, a terrible heat that cannot be broken with cool cloths or herbal infusions. By evening, his teeth are chattering with chills, and he complains of a deep, aching pain in his limbs, as if his bones are being crushed. This is more than a simple fever. Everyone knows it. A dreadful, unspoken understanding settles over the village. The next day, the true sign appears. In his groin, a lump has formed, a hard and exquisitely tender swelling that grows with terrifying speed. It is a bubo, the monstrous herald of the plague, soon the size of a hen's egg. His family is frantic. They try every remedy they know, every piece of folk wisdom passed down through generations. They apply poultices of hot onions and figs, hoping to soften the swelling. They might even resort to more desperate measures, rubbing the bubo with the bloody parts of a freshly killed pigeon, or a paste made of herbs and human excrement, believing that the evil of the disease will be drawn out by these things. The village priest is called. He comes, his face grim, and performs the last rites, his Latin prayers sounding hollow and powerless against the sickness that fills the small hut. You stay away, as do the other villagers. Fear is a stronger wall than wattle and daub. But you can hear the sounds from inside the cottage, the man's pained, delirious mumbling, the weeping of his wife and children. The smell of sickness, a sweet, cloying odor, seems to seep through the very walls. The swiftness of the decline is what is most shocking. This was a strong man, a man who worked the fields from dawn until dusk. Now he is helpless, his body consumed by an invisible fire. One chronicler's words echo in your mind, the story of those who breakfasted in the morning with their living friends and supped at night with their departed friends in the other world. Within 3 or 4 days, the sounds from the cottage change. The delirium gives way to a rattling, shallow breath, and then, finally, to silence. A silence that is heavier and more terrifying than any sound that came before it. The first body, the first death. The abstract horror has become a tangible reality, lying cold on a straw pallet just a few yards from your own door. The failure of all the known systems is laid bare. The herbal remedies of the wise woman have failed. The prayers of the priest have failed. The bonds of community have been replaced by a wall of fear. The plague is no longer a rumor or a distant threat. It is a neighbor. It is a presence inside your village. And as you look at the shuttered window of the silent cottage, a cold certainty settles in your stomach. This is only the beginning. The first death is like a stone dropped into a still pond, and the ripples of sickness spread with an unnatural speed. It is no longer one man, one family. It is the cottage next to his, and the one across the path. It seems to leap from house to house, an invisible predator stalking the familiar lanes of your village. The disease itself seems to change, to mutate into new and even more terrifying forms. You begin to hear a new sound, a sound that chills you to the bone, a deep, wet cough, followed by the spitting of bloody mucus. This is the pneumonic plague, a form that attacks the lungs. The villagers learn with horror that this sickness does not need a flea bite to spread. It travels on the air, in the very breath of the afflicted. Now, you are afraid not just of touching a sick person, but of the air itself. The simple act of breathing feels like a gamble. The community, already fractured by fear, dissolves into a collection of terrified, isolated households, each family barricaded inside their own smoky hut, praying the sickness will pass them by. Then comes the final, horrifying sign of the disease's power. On the skin of the dying, dark patches begin to appear, the tokens, or lenticulae, as some call them. They are bruises, signs of bleeding beneath the skin, and they are a certain omen of death. A person who develops the tokens is already gone. The village is transformed into a landscape of nightmares. The air itself feels sick. People believe the pestilence is a miasma, a corrupted vapor rising from the earth, and they try to fight it with smell. You carry a small bundle of herbs, rosemary or lavender, holding it to your nose, As you walk, a pathetic defense against the stench of death and decay that now hangs over everything. Some light fires of aromatic wood, hoping the smoke will purify the foul air. The sounds of normal life have vanished. The blacksmith's hammer is silent. The children's games in the churchyard have ceased. Instead, the air is filled with a cacophony of suffering. The rattling coughs of the pneumonic, the groans of those in the agony of the buboes, the weeping of families watching their loved ones die. But as the days turn into weeks, even these sounds begin to fade. The weeping stops as the mourners themselves fall sick. The coughs are silenced by death. A dreadful, creeping quiet begins to settle over the village, hut by hut. You look out from your own doorway, your heart pounding, and see a world that has become alien and hostile. The familiar faces of your neighbors are gone, replaced by the specter of a disease that is everywhere and nowhere at once. It is in the air you breathe, on the clothes of the dead, in the dust of the path. The village, once a place of shared labor and community, is now a trap. You are surrounded, besieged by an enemy you cannot see, one that is relentless, indiscriminate, and utterly invincible. The fear is no longer about a single death. It is about the end of everything, the extinguishing of your entire world. In this new world of terror and uncertainty, the two great pillars that have supported your life, the church and the traditional knowledge of healing, begin to crumble into dust. The village priest, a man who has been a figure of immense authority and spiritual comfort, moves tirelessly from cottage to cottage, his voice growing hoarse from reciting the last rites over the dying. He is a constant presence, a symbol of faith in the face of despair. And then, one day, he too falls ill. The man who was the conduit to God, who held the power to forgive sins and guide souls to the afterlife, develops the same fever, the same agonizing buboes as everyone else. His prayers had not saved him. This single event sends a shockwave of spiritual despair through the survivors. If God will not protect his own chosen servant, what hope is there for any of you? The church, once a sanctuary, now feels like just another building, its stone walls offering no protection from the invisible enemy. The faith that has been the bedrock of your existence is shaken to its very foundations. Into this spiritual vacuum steps a new and terrifying form of devotion. One day, a procession appears on the road leading to the village. It is a group of men, perhaps 200 or 300 strong, stripped to the waist, their faces gaunt and etched with a wild, fanatical light. They are the flagellants, zealots who believe the plague is God's punishment, and that only through extreme penance can his wrath be appeased. They march in a slow, grim procession, chanting hymns in a language you do not know. In their hands, they carry scourges whips with 3 knotted leather tails, studded with sharp pieces of metal or nails. As they reach the center of the village, they form a circle and begin to whip themselves, the scourges rising and falling in a dreadful rhythmic beat. The sound is sickening, a wet, slapping noise as the leather and metal bite into their own backs, drawing blood that spatters on the ground and the walls of the nearby cottages. They fall to the ground, crying out their sins, their bodies a mass of bleeding wounds. This is not a sight of hope. It is a vision of a world gone mad, a spectacle of pain and desperation that offers no comfort, only more horror. At the same time, the old ways of healing are exposed as completely useless. The folk remedies and herbal cures have no effect. The very idea of medicine, based on the ancient theory of the 4 humors blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, is powerless against this new reality. Some may have heard of physicians in the towns who attempt to treat the plague by lancing the buboes or through bloodletting, believing that releasing bad blood will restore balance to the body. But these treatments only weaken the patient and hasten their death. There is no cure. The authorities of this world, both spiritual and physical, have failed. The priest lies dying in his house. The wise woman's herbs are useless. The flagellants offer only a public display of madness. You are utterly alone, stripped of every certainty, every source of comfort and authority you have ever known. The world is no longer governed by the laws of God or man, but by the arbitrary and merciless logic of the pestilence. The bonds that held your world together, forged over centuries of shared life and obligation, snap one by one. The first to break are the most sacred, the ties of family. The fear of contagion becomes a poison that dissolves love and duty. You see it happen with your own eyes. A door is barred from the inside, and you hear the faint cries of a sick child who has been left to die alone. A husband flees his cottage, leaving his wife in the grip of the fever. Mothers abandon their children, and children their parents, the instinct for self-preservation overwhelming every other human impulse. The village, once a community where everyone knew your name and your history, becomes a collection of isolated, terrified individuals, each person an island of fear. The social contract has been rendered null and void. The formal structures of power evaporate just as quickly. The lord of the manor and his family, who have always lived in their great house, separate and protected, are among the first to flee, taking their wealth and their servants with them to some remote estate they hope is untouched by the sickness. The bailiff and the reeve, the enforcers of the lord's authority, either follow their master or succumb to the plague themselves. There is no one left to organize the labor, to collect the dues, to preside over the manor court. The entire hierarchy that defined your life, from the king down to the lowest peasant, has simply vanished. You are no longer a villain, because the system that made you one has ceased to exist. You are free, but it is the terrifying freedom of utter abandonment. You walk through the silent village, and the evidence of this collapse is everywhere. The great open fields, the heart of your community's existence, are falling into neglect. You see your own strips of land, but next to them, the strips belonging to your dead neighbors are overgrown with weeds. The wheat in the autumn field, which should be ripening for the harvest, stands untended, its heads beginning to droop. There are not enough hands left to bring it in. The sight is a profound violation of the natural order you have always known. But even more haunting are the sounds or the lack of them. The most distressing is the lowing of untended cattle, their udders painfully full, with no one to milk them. You hear the desperate squealing of pigs and the frantic clucking of chickens, starving in their pens. The animals, who have always been a part of your domestic world, are now fellow victims of the abandonment. Their suffering is a mirror of the human desolation, a primal cry in a world where all care and obligation have been extinguished by fear. The rhythm of the fields, the cycle of planting and harvesting that you knew in Part 1, is broken. The world has come undone. And then, as slowly and mysteriously as it arrived, the pestilence begins to recede. The wave of death, having consumed so much of the village, finally breaks and pulls back, leaving behind a world scoured clean and terrifyingly quiet. The primary feeling is not relief, but a profound and unnerving silence. The cacophony of suffering, the coughing, the weeping, the delirious cries has faded away, replaced by an emptiness that is almost a physical presence. The familiar sounds of village life have vanished completely. You no longer hear the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer on the anvil, a sound that once marked the passing of the day. There is no laughter of children playing in the churchyard, no chatter of women at the well, no dogs barking at passers-by. The silence is a heavy blanket, muffling the world, a constant reminder of all who are gone. You find yourself walking the lanes of the village, a ghost in your own home. You pass cottages that you know are empty, their doors hanging open, swinging gently in the breeze. You peer inside and see scenes of life interrupted, frozen in time. A half-eaten bowl of pottage on a table, now covered in mold. A piece of weaving still on the loom, the shuttle dropped beside it. A child's wooden toy lying in the dust of the floor. Each object is a testament to a life cut short, a story left unfinished. These are not just empty houses. They are tombs, filled with the silent presence of the departed. The landscape itself seems to be mourning, or perhaps reclaiming what was always its own. The carefully tended crofts behind the cottages are choked with weeds. The paths that were once kept clear by the passage of many feet are becoming faint, overgrown with grass. Nature is moving back in, erasing the small marks of human existence with an indifferent patience. The air itself feels different. The foul stench of sickness and death has dissipated, washed away by the rain and the wind. The air is clean and fresh again, but it feels unnaturally thin, empty. You stand in the middle of the village and look around at the desolation. Half the homes, maybe more, are silent and dark. You are a survivor, but there is no sense of victory in it. You are simply one of the few who were, for no discernible reason, spared. The feeling is one of immense, crushing loneliness. You are adrift in a sea of quiet. The world you were born into, the world of your parents and their parents before them, has been wiped away in a matter of months. What is left is a hollow shell, a place of memories and ghosts, haunted by the great, overwhelming silence of the dead. The silence of the dead is soon replaced by a grim and urgent necessity. The living must bury the world they have lost. The task is overwhelming, a duty that must be performed amidst the ruins of the old ways. The parish churchyard, the sacred ground where generations of your ancestors have been laid to rest, is full. There is no more space. The traditional rites of burial, the individual funeral service, the procession from home to church, the family gathered at the graveside, are a luxury that the sheer scale of death has made impossible. The system has broken down completely. A new terrible solution is required. The few survivors, perhaps led by a remaining cleric from a nearby abbey, or the most resilient of the village elders, make a decision born of desperation. A mass grave must be dug, a plague pit. It is dug not in the consecrated ground of the churchyard, but in an open piece of land nearby, a field that will now become a permanent repository of the village's sorrow. The work is grim and physically exhausting. You and the other able-bodied survivors take up spades and dig into the heavy, damp earth. The pit is wide and deep, a great wound opened in the landscape. Then comes the task of gathering the bodies. They are carried from the silent cottages, wrapped in simple shrouds of cloth. You see the faces of your neighbors, your friends, people you shared labor and laughter with, their features now slack and discolored in death. The sheer number of children is the most heart-wrenching sight. Their small, shrouded forms a testament to the plague's indiscriminate cruelty. The work is a blur of grief and physical strain, performed under a sky that seems indifferent to the horror below. Yet, even in this moment of ultimate crisis, a flicker of the old reverence remains. The bodies are not simply thrown into the pit. Archaeological discoveries from such rural graves show a surprising degree of care. Each corpse is laid down gently, placed in neat, orderly rows, side by side, without overlapping. The young are interspersed with the old. It is a final, desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos, to afford some measure of dignity to the dead, even when all other rituals have been abandoned. You work in a grim, silent rhythm, laying one shrouded body down, then another, then another. The first layer is completed, and a thin covering of earth is shoveled over them. And the second layer begins. The pit becomes a terrible stratigraphy of loss, layer upon layer of your friends, your family, your entire community. When the last body is laid to rest and the final layer of earth is spread, you stand back, leaning on your spade, your body aching, your soul numb. You have buried your world. The pit is a raw, unmarked scar on the land, a silent monument to a catastrophe so vast it has no name, and to the quiet, stubborn humanity of those who survived to perform this last, terrible duty. In the weeks and months that follow the great burial, you begin to move through a world that is both intimately familiar and terrifyingly strange. You walk out to the fields, to the strip of land that your family has worked for generations, a plot you held from the Lord in exchange for labor and dues. But now, the very concept of that arrangement has dissolved into thin air. The strips of land on either side of yours, belonging to families who are now gone, lie fallow and unclaimed. The Lord of the manor has not returned. The manor house stands empty and silent. There is no reeve to demand your labor, no bailiff to oversee your work. The entire structure of servitude that has defined your existence has simply evaporated. You are tied to this land, not by law or obligation, but only by memory. This new reality brings with it a feeling that is not quite freedom, but a disorienting and profound shift in the very nature of your world. Land, which was once the most precious and scarce commodity, the source of all wealth and status, is now suddenly abundant. It is labor, human life itself, that is rare and valuable. You look at the vast, untended domain of the Lord, the fields that you were once forced to work for free, and a startling realization dawns on you. There is no one to stop you from walking away. You could leave this village, your ancestral home, and seek a new life elsewhere. The bonds of serfdom, which once seemed as strong and immutable as iron, have been broken not by rebellion or royal decree, but by the silent, indifferent work of the pestilence. You see the same dawning awareness in the eyes of the other survivors. The old hierarchies have been leveled in a way no one could have imagined. You are no longer just a villain, a serf, a peasant. You are a survivor. A new kind of community begins to form, one based not on the rigid structure of feudal obligation, but on the shared trauma of what you have all endured. When you speak with your neighbors, it is with a new kind of equality. The plague struck down the wealthy and the poor, the freeman and the serf, with almost equal ferocity. The old distinctions seem hollow and meaningless in the face of such a catastrophe. You are a small band of people left to inhabit a world that is too large for you. A world filled with empty houses, empty fields, and the ghosts of the millions who are gone. This newfound power, this unsettling freedom, is not something you asked for. It was born from unimaginable loss, and it feels fragile and uncertain. You stand on your small piece of earth and look out at the changed landscape, a stranger in the only world you have ever known. The strange, quiet world of the immediate aftermath begins to stir with new life, and with it, new conflicts. Your newfound value as a laborer is no longer an abstract concept. It becomes a tangible reality. Men arrive in the village, bailiffs or stewards from other manors, where the Lord has survived, and they are looking for workers. For the first time in your life, you are not being commanded. You are being courted. They offer you wages, not in the form of land use or protection, but in actual coin, silver pennies that you can hold in your hand. They offer more than you could have ever dreamed of earning before the pestilence. You and the other surviving peasants are in a position of unprecedented power. You can negotiate. You can play one lord off against another. You can choose to leave your ancestral village for a better offer elsewhere, and many do, taking advantage of the freedom to move that was once forbidden. But the old order does not surrender easily. The landowning classes, the nobility, and the gentry are horrified by this shift in power. They see the rising wages and the newfound assertiveness of the peasantry, not as a simple matter of supply and demand, but as a breakdown of the God-given social hierarchy, a sign of moral decay. In response, they turn to the power of the king and the law. In 1351, the crown enacts the Statute of Laborers, a sweeping decree that attempts to turn back the clock. It makes it illegal for peasants to demand, or for lords to pay, wages higher than the levels they were at before the plague. It commands that every able-bodied man and woman must work for whoever requires them, and it restricts their freedom of movement. You feel the crushing weight of this injustice. The world has changed. You have survived a living hell, and now the lords and the king want to pretend that nothing has happened, to force you back into the old state of powerlessness. A quiet rebellion begins to simmer throughout the countryside. The laws are enforced with determination, but they are ultimately no match for the new economic reality. Lords are desperate for labor to work their lands, and many are willing to break the law in secret, paying higher wages to attract the few workers available. The resentment among the peasantry grows, a deep, burning anger at the injustice of the new laws. This anger will fester for decades, eventually erupting into open rebellion, like the Great Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Meanwhile, the very landscape of England continues to change. With fewer people to perform the intensive labor of growing grain, many lords find it more profitable to convert their arable fields into pasture for sheep. The burgeoning wool trade requires far fewer hands. You watch as the familiar patchwork of wheat and barley fields, the landscape of your youth, is slowly replaced by vast, empty green spaces dotted with grazing flocks. The world is becoming quieter, emptier, and the earth itself is shifting to reflect the new reality of a depopulated kingdom. Years pass, but the shadow of the great mortality never truly leaves you. The physical plague may be gone, a recurring threat that now comes and goes in smaller, more localized waves, but its scars are etched deep into your soul and the collective mind of your generation. The world is now obsessed with death. You see it reflected in the art that begins to appear, in carvings and paintings in the churches. A new, morbid theme emerges, the danse macabre, the dance of death. In these images, a skeletal figure of death leads a procession of people from all walks of life. The king in his crown, the pope in his mitre, the knight in his armor, the beautiful maiden, and the simple peasant like yourself, all dancing together towards a single, inevitable grave. The message is clear and unsettling. Death is the great leveler, and no one, no matter their station, can escape its grasp. This is a truth you have seen with your own eyes. A deep and abiding mistrust has taken root in your heart. You remember the abandonment, the way neighbors and even family members turned away from the sick in their terror. The bonds of community, once thought unbreakable, proved to be terrifyingly fragile. You find it harder to trust people now. You are more guarded, more watchful. The world feels like a fundamentally unsafe place, a lesson learned in the hardest possible way. Your own body feels like a stranger to you. You are constantly aware of its vulnerability. A simple cough, a passing fever, a feeling of weariness, any small ailment now brings with it a jolt of the old, cold fear. You have survived, but you live with the constant, quiet hum of anxiety, the knowledge of how quickly and easily life can be extinguished. There is a strange paradox to your new life. In many ways, your standard of living has improved beyond anything you could have imagined before the plague. With labor so valuable and land so plentiful, you have more money. Your diet is better. Meat, once a rare luxury, is now more common. You eat better bread, made from wheat, instead of coarse barley or rye. You can afford to drink ale more regularly. You have survived, and in material terms, you are prospering. But this prosperity is haunted. Every bite of food is eaten with the memory of those who starved or died. Every extra penny you earn feels as though it is stained with loss. The world is richer for the survivors, but it is also emptier. It is a bittersweet inheritance, a new life built upon a foundation of graves. The plague has receded from the land, but it lives on inside you, a quiet, persistent guest, a permanent scar on your soul. Decades have now passed since the first wave of the great mortality swept over your world. You are older now, your hands more gnarled, your face a map of the years of labor and sorrow. You stand on a small rise overlooking the village, the same village you were born in, and you see a landscape that has been utterly and permanently transformed. The village is smaller than the one you remember from your youth. Some of the abandoned cottages at the edge of the settlement have collapsed entirely, their wattle and daub walls melting back into the earth. the ground where they stood now covered in a thick carpet of grass and wildflowers. They are quiet monuments to the families that are gone forever, a permanent physical scar reminding all who remain of the scale of the loss. But the village is not dead. It is alive. New families have arrived over the years, drawn by the promise of available land and the chance for a life better than the one their parents knew. The soundscape is a quiet mixture of the old and the new. The church bell still tolls, marking the hours and calling the faithful to prayer, but the community it calls is smaller, more subdued. The most common sound now is not the rhythmic work of the harvest, but the gentle bleating of sheep from the vast pastures that have replaced many of the old arable fields. You look down at your own hands. They are the hands of a man who is no longer a serf. You are no longer bound to this land by the will of a lord. Instead, you hold your land by what is called a copyhold, a lease recorded in the manor court rolls. That piece of parchment, that written agreement, is a symbol of a new world, a world where your labor has a price and your life has a measure of freedom that your ancestors could never have conceived. The end of serfdom did not come as a gift from a benevolent king or a change of heart from the nobility. It was born in the crucible of the plague, forged in the decades of struggle and quiet defiance that followed. It was paid for by the deaths of millions. You feel the cool evening breeze on your face and look out at the setting sun, which casts long shadows across the ridges and furrows of the fields that are still farmed. The world did not end, as so many had feared it would. It was broken, yes, but it did not end. It was reshaped. You have lived through the greatest catastrophe in living memory, and have witnessed the slow, painful birth of a new kind of society from the ashes of the old. There is a quiet, hard-won peace in this new world, a peace built on a foundation of sorrow. The faces of the dead are always with you, a silent audience to your new life. But as you turn to walk back to your small, sturdy cottage, you know that you have endured. The human spirit, like the grass that grows over the ruins of the old houses, has found a way to continue, to put down new roots in a changed and wounded earth. The memory of the great silence still lingers, a quiet echo in the fields and in the heart, but the world, slowly, painstakingly, has learned to make sound again. The sun dips below the horizon, and as the gentle darkness falls, you feel not the terror of the past, but the quiet resilience of the present. The journey has been long and unimaginably hard, but it is not over. A new day will dawn, and you will rise to meet it. And so, the story of that village, and of your time within it, gently comes to a close. The images of the fields, the quiet cottages, and the faces of those who lived and were lost begin to soften now, fading like mist in the morning sun. The weight of the past, the chill of fear, and the quiet ache of sorrow can all be released, drifting away on the slow current of time. Let the silence of the plague pit fall away, replaced by the gentle quiet of your own peaceful space. The world you have just visited was one of immense hardship, a testament to the endurance of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming loss. But it is a world far away now. You are safe in the warmth and comfort of your own bed, in your own time. The struggles of that distant century are but whispers now, echoes in a long and quiet story. As you drift deeper into rest, let the final image be one of peace, the green fields of England, healed by time, sleeping silently under the stars. And the fields, in their own time, remember everything.